Good afternoon. I invite you, please, to take your seats. C'è sindaco, c'è? È che... Sì. Chiudilo un secondo, solo perché il problema è che non è arrivato. let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. And a very warm welcome to Turin. This is Francesco Antonioli. I'm a journalist. I'm from Turin. And we are delighted to be with you in this extraordinary location, the OGR, le Officine Grandi Riparazioni, which is one of the key landmarks for technologies and social innovation. We'd like to take a moment to remember all the people involved in the current tragic Ukrainian war, which led us to this difficult geopolitical moment we are currently living. Our topic for today is a new impact era, the evolution of social impact in public and private policy to catalyze new economic models for the benefit for all. This is what Global Steering Group for Impact Investment aims for. And I'd like to take this occasion to welcome you there on behalf of Social Impact Agenda for Italy, which is the national board of GSG. Turin has become a reference point for the impact economy thanks to development of the Torino social impact ecosystem, which now counts over 200 partners, including companies, professional associations, cooperatives, and third sector enterprises. Both public and private decision makers worked hard on creating this important experience. So I'm really happy to introduce you to the Deputy Mayor of Turin, Michela Favaro. She's here to bring us the greetings of the city administration. Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished guests and representative of 34 countries. I'm very pleased and honored to host this meeting here in Turin, and a special thanks to Turin Social Impact and to the Social Impact Agenda for having organized this important meeting. Turin has a long history and tradition in social innovation. At the end of 19th century, Don Bosco, now famous in the world as a Salesian founder, gave refuge to youngsters immigrated from the countryside from Piedmont during the industrialization of Turin. Don Bosco didn't only give refuge and home to these young people, but through the establishment of a professional training school, he let them become a part of the development of the city and of the economic success of our city. I think that it is very important to remember how our town is still a living laboratory for social innovation. We have here the seat of two of the main philanthropic bank foundations of our country, Compagnia di San Paolo and Fondazione CRT, and they are between the main actors of innovative social policies aimed to reduce the gap of social inequalities. I'm very interested to assist this panel and get some suggestions to keep on innovating in our city from the perspective of social impact. I wish you a fruitful discussion, and I hope you will enjoy staying here in Turin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Here with us we also have Guido Bolatto, who is the General Secretary of the Turin Chamber of Commerce, which has always promoted and supported the implementation of the social impact ecosystem in Turin. Guido, they are all yours.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to welcome the GSG leadership meeting and all the attendees on the behalf of Torino Chamber of Commerce. And especially I would like to thank Sir Ronald Cohen, GSG President, and Giovanna Melandri, President of Social Impact Agenda for Italy, for very strong support in choosing Torino as the host city for today's event. I would also like to thank Torino Social Impact, all its partners and all the staff that work to the organization of this meeting. We proudly remind that our entity, the Chamber of Commerce, together with the City of Torino and with the support of Compagnia di San Paolo, has contributed to create this social impact platform that is an unicum in Italy in this moment. We are also very happy of the path Torino Social Impact chose and its outcome, which is today there, available for 220 organizations, spanning from big banks to small local no-profit associations, whose goal is to nurture social entrepreneurship and invest capital meant to have a social impact. Looking beyond the circumstances has allowed us to prepare our city to be ready to tackle the challenges that are now squeezing and impacting the economic system, and the European Commission political agenda, as appears from the current social economic action plan that places the social economy among the 14 pillars on which basing Europe's industrial revitalization. Our region is very responsive on this issue and is an hub with many cases worth studying. Our new projects are interesting and innovative, and today's meeting will contribute to make them far more accessible and approachable, certainly better than I myself would do. For this reason, I now leave the floor to the delegates, and I bring my speech to a close by mentioning the case of the social stock exchange backed by Torino Chamber of Commerce and Compagnia di San Paolo. I'm sure that Davide, after better than me, explain the meaning of Torino Social Impact, but we are talking here of the first stock exchange in the world totally dedicated to transaction based on objectively gauging social impact of the bonds exchanged. Torino Chamber of Commerce, like all the Chamber of Commerce in Italy, is a public administration showing every day to be on the side of the different forms of our local entrepreneurship, engaging in social issues while catering for the different needs of the markets, social enterprises, cooperatives, startups with social impact business, and in general, all the different forms of entrepreneurship provided it delivers substantially profit. So, thank you to be here, and I hope you have a good meeting, but also I hope you can prove and enjoy the life of the city and especially our food and drink. Thank you.
Grazie Guido.
Thank you very much, Guido.
These are the representatives of two Turin banking foundations, Fondazione CRT and Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo, both playing an important role in Italy and in particular in Turin. They have supported the impact economy from the beginning. Their use of economic resources has always been led by accountability and civic duty sensitivity. Together with them, there is Massimo Lapucci, who is a Fondazione CRT General Secretary, but it's important, also one of the managers here at the OGR. In fact, the foundation has been involved into the transformation of this place where trains used to be repaired.
Thank you. So, thank you. So, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and allow me to welcome you to OGR, also on behalf of Fondazione CRT and Fondazione Sviluppo in Crescita, our special vehicle we founded for specifically carry on our initiative on impact investing activities. OGR is a place of synergies, I would say, and also a place on hybrid vision, and in fact, contemporary vision and the most advanced missions of Fondazione CRT, its shareholder, are brought to life here, namely to support the territory, to create value for this territory and beyond. It is with this spirit that in 2017 we reopened this building after many years of abandon. This building was built in 1885. It was the first workshop in Torino dedicated and devoted as a mission for train maintenance and construction. Then in the 1990s it was completely abandoned, and together with Fondazione CRT we bought it and completely refurbished to transform in a building with a new mission, always dedicated to the excellence. This is the spirit, we had in mind when we started this refurbishment. Starting from this part of the building that we call OGR Tech. This part of the building is dedicated to tech, innovation, technological transition. In many sectors, aerospace, smart cities, gaming, edutech, social impact, big data, AI. And of course, this is also the result of many partnerships that we have put together to have all this impact for the territory. When we started and when we reopened this building, our goal was to help Italy bridge the gap in venture capital and also in tech, particularly, with specific figures in our mind. In 15 years, to accelerate about 1,000 of startups in this place, and also attracting €500 million in terms of resources. Well, the 2021 impact report shows that we are well ahead of this timing, and probably if the pace remains at this rate, we will have the projected goals in terms of timing we need to reach these goals. This approach has allowed us to develop now 12 programs, acceleration programs, with over 70 partners, corporate partners, but also financial institutions, starting from our bank system, and particularly the two banks. And I remember that we are together, CRT and Compagnia di San Paolo, two foundations of banking origins, as we are not part of the banking sector, but we are shareholders of the two major banks here in Italy. So now in course of 1 year, we are able to accelerate about over 130 startups. In strong synergy with the mission of Fondazione CRT, a philanthropic institution, we put a lot of effort and attention also considering the objective of the United Nations 2030 agenda and of course the European Next Generation programs. To give you some very quick examples, we have here the SDG number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. I think about our acceleration program with Techstars. Techstars came from the US to Italy for the first time here at the OGR. Or number 10, reduce inequalities. I'm thinking about our gaming programs in particular and a very young entrepreneurs team working to develop video games for blind and visually impaired players. And again, number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure with Lift-T, an example of investment operating company combining innovation, business, and finance, and with a specific motto, a not only profit company. Of course, all this inspiration is guided also by the number 8 of our SDGs, promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, and decent work for all. This is part of our mission also as a foundation. And of course, all this has been made possible considering also the goal 17 that I consider specifically important every day, partnership for the goals. All this has been possible through specific partnership. If you look around you, you see many brands and logos recalling all our partners here. We do this also with a specific consideration of the importance of big data and the expansion of big data, considering also how to extract public value from data. This is why we founded here, just over there, the first European data center for social good, under the scientific direction of Professor Ciro Cattuto, who, by the way, will also moderate the first panel today. So the center is also a result of 30 years of investment by Fondazione CRT in big data. It's not something that we invented because it is now particularly, important and also quite, let's say, a fashion trend, a trendy, element. On a different role, on the other side of the building, we also have the so-called OGR cult, because also culture is part of our mission and vision. And we host concerts, exhibitions, shows, performances, projects, many projects in partnership with the MoMA, Tate Modern in London, British Council, La Caixa Foundation, just to mention a few. But also we develop a lot of projects for family and disadvantaged children with another entity of Fondazione CRT called ULAOP, with specific programs aimed at families with children aged 3 to 12. Or just to mention another one, the opera show, mixing together the best opera areas with social messages specifically for younger crowd. So to be able to host and to conclude this event at OGR Torino underlines for me and for the all OGR and CRT team the important roles that philanthropic institutions have to play in the impact field. Specifically, philanthropy through the use of patient capital, through the experimentation of frontier areas, and also encouraging a stronger hybrid approach between the profit and non-profit sectors is playing an increasingly stronger role in promoting and supporting innovation and sustainability. This is our vision, this is our mission, this is the role that we want to play now and in the future. So again, a big thank to the GSG for choosing Torino. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Giovanna, and all the distinguished guests that are with us today. And I want to thank you for choosing Torino as the venue for this annual meeting. And again, welcome to OGR Torino. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lapucci. Could you believe Compagnia di San Paolo Foundation was founded way back in 1563? And from the very beginning, its DNA has been characterized by social impact. Now it's the most significant reality amongst the European foundations with banking background. Paolo Mulasano, who I invite on stage, tells us about it. Mr. Mulasano is in charge of the Impact Innovation Direction of Compagnia di San Paolo. Please.
Grazie. Grazie a tutti, and welcome also from my side. It's really a privilege to be here with you. It's a privilege to be part of this important event and share Massimo, the comment of Massimo, and thank you very much, Dr. Cohen, Dr. Melandri as well, for selecting this venue and selecting Torino for this important meeting, and which is actually at the basis, as already said, of the activities of Compagnia di San Paolo. As Fondazione CRT, we are actually in the execution of our strategic plan. So it's the second year now. We based our strategic plan on with a strong reference to SDGs, with a strong reference to Next Generation EU. Of course, we do refer all of our actions to the resilience and recovery plan of our country. And we share all of these initiatives with the Chamber of Commerce and, of course, with the city of Torino. And I really thank Dr. Favaro and Dr. Bollato for their introduction that, as you have seen, is always recalling the role of philanthropic institution within the public, supporting public administration. In launching initiatives that are oriented to the creation of the ecosystem, okay? So in this case, we really, let me say, we are really considering social economy as one of the engine power of this territory. For such a reason, we started with the Chamber of Commerce this initiative that has been already underlined as Torino Social Impact. And of course, we concluded the 3-year, 2019 to 2021, and we are now in supporting new initiatives for the period 22-24. The reason is that it's quite simple. There are already many social economy institutions, companies, startups that are doing activities on a daily basis in this territory, but not only in this territory. And so, to give you a flavor of our activities, for example, we are now in execution of a program called Next Generation EU like YOU, that is actually supporting more than 150 social economy institutions in, let me say, writing again their strategy of impact, taking in consideration the 2020, the period of the virus, and then now the war in Ukraine. Another major important initiative done by Compagnia di San Paolo, together in that case, in this second case with Fondazione Cariplo, is a call for proposal called Evoluzione, that is in Italian, but for supporting the digital evolution, the upskilling toward the digital competencies and capacity building for all the social innovation institutions that are active now in Piedmont, in Lombardia, and in Liguria as well. So for us, let me say that social economy, social innovation, social impact, at the end of the day, deals with the definition of innovation, the brown dredge. For us, innovation means the art to generate value, value for customers and for society. So the broad range, using tools, using data that we own or that we could have access to. So very important, the activity on data and data science launched by Fondazione CRT with respect to social innovation. For sure, we need to push further, for example, on the concept of social procurement, which will be another major initiative that will be launched by Compagnia San Paolo soon. We really believe that there are already actors that are not yet capable to get access to finance. So we really need to help them to create together with, let me say, an innovation ecosystem, a strong financial ecosystem to support the growth of these social impact and social economy institutions. So I believe I conclude my speech. I really thank you again for being here with us. We are more than open to discuss with you opportunities to, let me say, as a philanthropic institution, to find the best way to impact on all the needs that you can, let me say, highlight for us. We study a lot. We are studying the Social Economy Action Plan recently published by European Commission. Our president, Professor Profumo, is always pushing us very hard to study all the dynamics, all the opportunities launched by European Commission. And we really would like to be a sort, as a philanthropic foundation, to be a sort of hub, trying to, with our friends, trying to put together needs of the financial communities, needs of the, let me say, social economy, needs from the European Commission, and of course, needs of the territories that are hosting all the institutions that aims to generate an impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mulasano. Anyway, we are about to start the first important panel, which I remind you, it has to last 45 minutes. It will be coordinated by Professor Mario Calderini, spokesperson for Torino Social Impact, and one of the academics who has been mostly committed to serious and well-founded social investing in Italy and elsewhere, obviously, over these last years. We will talk about data and impact, a deal for the common good. Thank you, Mario, for what you do. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Francesco. And thank you, everybody, for being with us today. Great pleasure and honor. And yes, I'll be moderating the next panel on data for impact, of course. But let me just give some context information before. Torino Social Impact is something that we may define a sort of intentionality platform. It's a platform where all the efforts of impact-oriented organization, more than 200, gather and try to share efforts to deliver positive impact. And one of the things that this platform does, well, one is having you all here, of course, and finding a place for Turin in the word map of impact. And the other thing is to design, prototype, nurture innovative projects. And so we decided to trigger the discussion in the two panels that we will have by presenting two of these projects. The first one is a data space for impact data. And the second one is a very risky project on having a stock exchange entirely dedicated to transactions that are based on impact measurement. And for this reason, I would invite, for the first panel, I would invite Ciro Cattuto with us. That is the scientific... Ciro was already mentioned, is the scientific director of EASY Foundation and is on the steering committee of the CRT Foundation. And Ciro will present this project on a data space for impact. So I won't say anything about that. It's up to you. And then I would like to have on stage with me Karim Arji. Karim works with investors and ventures to describe, measure, and improve their social impact, and is the program director of the Oxford Impact Measurement Project. Then we have David Henry Doyle. Yes, here we are. David is the head of Government Affairs and Public Policy for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa at Standard & Poor's Global. Thank you for being with us. Katie Pinella. Katie is the project manager for the Impact-Weighted Accounts project at Harvard. Thank you for being with us. And Stephanie Neer, who is the head of ESG and sustainability at a typical partner, a fund that recently established in Milano. So very happy to have you with us. Ciro, I think it's better if you sit here. And Stephanie, you will be there, yes. And so thank you, and I'm especially grateful to Katie and Stephanie for accepting this invitation on a very short notice. So thank you very much. Ciro, the floor is yours for your project.
Thank you, Mario. I was trying to work out my geometry here. I didn't expect
it's challenging.
Imbalance, so this is a challenge, in fact. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mario, for setting up such an interesting panel. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I would like to start by setting the stage about the digital transformation. We are speaking about data here. Data is really what fuels artificial intelligence, machine learning. Whenever we speak about the value of digital, it is fueled centrally by data. And one of the big challenges for this community, but for everybody in general, I would say, you see I have difficulties with this, is how we can collectively guide the digital transformation so that it delivers more social value, more equitably distributed. And clearly, market forces alone are not doing this for us. We are observing, of course, a massive generation of value from data and data-related technologies, but we are also observing an emergence of entire industries that are very extractive in the value that we get out of data, where this value is not redistributed. And we are observing very fast centralization, if you will, of data, of knowledge, of infrastructures for processing data. So the big question I would like to address here in this initial comment is really, what can we do as a community to activate an ecosystem for the social impact of data? How do we activate partnership? This place, as the Secretary General of CRT Foundation, is a place devoted to partnerships and synergies. What new synergies do we need so that we can generate more value from data? And there are many gaps there that we need to address, but the key one is that a lot of the missed value of data is reuse of privately held data. A lot of the data is born in private hands for business purposes, and the key challenge there is how can we effectively create perimeters where this data is reused in a sustainable, trustworthy way so that it generates and fuels more shared and equitably generated value. And we focus rightfully a lot on the externalities of data, of the negative externalities, sorry, of data. For very good reasons. Data speak very intimately of our communities, of our world, of ourselves, down to very intimate details. So there is a massive potential there for violations of the human dignity, for human rights violations. And rightfully, we have a lot of safeguards in place. Think in the European context, we have the General Data Protection Regulation, right? And now we have an upcoming wave of new regulations. I think that this is the time now to focus on how we activate the positive externalities of data, what we can do so that we can create new partnerships that generate this value in a sustainable way. And this requires essentially creating new cross-sectoral partnerships so that, for example, data privately held by a corporate can be used by social impact entrepreneurs. We have seen this during the the COVID crisis, right? You remember at the very beginning, one of the challenges was how do we measure the impact of mobility restrictions and lockdowns? And data from private sector, data from telcos actually came to the rescue from that. So we have seen, in a sense, with COVID, both the limit, how much we should have done, and the opportunities of data responsibly used. And so to tackle this problem, I would say there are two approaches. There is an approach of coming at it from the top, with regulations. And I mentioned already the General Data Protection Regulation, but you are aware of the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, the upcoming regulation on artificial intelligence by the European Commission. All of these have a new language of social cohesion. You might have noticed in the Data Governance Act that there is a mention of data altruism, that we speak of data cooperatives. These are terms that belong a lot to this community, right? And so there is a role for regulation there, but there is also a role, and I would say a new role for funders and social impact, for the social impact community, in creating examples from the bottom, in creating new experiences that can be embraced as concrete realizations of these ideas that are present in the upcoming regulation. And so basically the challenge there is what is the new role of funders and philanthropy in activating an ecosystem for the social impact of data. And this is, if you think about that, about creating new collaborations, a people infrastructure for the social impact of data, new partnership, new cross-sectoral data spaces where data can be reused in a trustworthy and responsible ways, new synergies with national initiatives and infrastructures that are emerging. And all of this is not new. In a sense, many foundations have been thinking about this for 5-6 years. Today, the idea that data is in the agenda of philanthropists and funders is, of course, widely accepted. But now is the time to actually test drive some new experiences. And this is why I'm very happy to mention that one such experience is actually running right here, right now. It's called Impact Deal, and it is a partnership involving CRT Foundation and Microsoft Corporation, where we actually designed, with Topics as an operational partner, a new data space, a perimeter where some corporates invest data, not capital, in social impact enterprises and in impact-oriented startups. So this is a program that we piloted a few months ago. We just closed the applications, and we are very happy to see that the program received 40 applications, out of which more than 20% was coming outside of Italy. And we have inside this perimeter corporates such as TIM, such as NAM Foundation, such as the Sella Bank, the city of Torino. The city of Torino actually connected to this perimeter with the Torino City Lab. So this is really an exercise in creating a data space, a realization of some of the social cohesion projected by the Data Governance Act into enabling startups and entrepreneurs to power the mission of their organizations by reusing privately held data that would not be otherwise unlocked. So in a summary, this is a data space where we aim at unlocking in a responsible way the social impact reuse of privately held data with the guarantee of a bank foundation such as CRT. Like the philanthropists have a social license to operate in the public interest, and we plan to leverage on this to actually demonstrate new ways of generating social cohesions. So it is an experiment. About half of the SDGs are covered by the startups and enterprises who applied and were selected as part of this program. And this is starting these days, literally. So it's what I'm telling you is more of a use case, is something that is hitting the starting block right now. And we very much look forward to see how this unfolds in the coming months and weeks. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, Ciro. And yes, thank you. And I want to welcome our Vice Minister for the Social Economy, Laura Castelli, that will be in dialogue with Giovanna Melandri. At the end of this meeting, before that, we have Maurizio Molinari in dialogue with Sir Ronnie Cohen. So, very good. So I think that was a very good way to start our discussion. And the first question, to which I would ask you to provide a short answer, like in 3 or 4 minutes, if possible, is, of course, how important it is to have a data space in terms of data quality for impact measurement. A very broad question that is nevertheless very important, because we know the discussion that is going on impact measurement and on ESG ratings, of course. And it will be a bit difficult today to start a discussion on data and impact measurement without making any reference to the statement of Elon Musk saying that the ESG grammar is a scam, and to see whether it means anything to the impact community, if anything. So I don't have a particular order, so Katie, I would start with you, and then I'll move in this direction. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm Katie Pinella with the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative. All day and all night we are talking about data. There's our biggest challenge and our biggest opportunity. So I'll say a couple things. What we do briefly, just to orient you to where I'm coming from. The Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative aims to create financial accounts that reflect social, environmental, and financial performance to drive better decision making. So when we're working with investors, their #1 request of us is, give me data. I want to know actual social and environmental performance, and I want to know it in a language, the language of currency, that I can use for decision making. We use publicly available data to create monetized impact estimates, and what we hear, unfortunately, from corporates is that these data numbers don't reflect our actual performance. Now, of course, we are using data that has been reported by these companies. So the problem is that when you put bad information in, you get information out that might not, necessarily reflect the truth. So the closer we can bring corporate reporting to actual social and environmental performance, the better use investors will be able to have with that data once they request it for us. So.
Thank you. It was even shorter than expected. Thank you very much. So we may have time for more questions. Yeah, David, thank you for being with us. And of course, Standard & Poor's is a key player, and probably shifting the balance in one direction or another direction, and defining standards for impact measurement. So I'd like to hear from you what you think about that. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And before I start my remarks, I just wanted to really commend the work of the GSG. We've been working with them on the G7 Impact Task Force for the last year almost. And that report that was presented to the G7 in December is really a groundbreaking report. And it talks a lot about data. It talks about why data matters, why the integrity of data matters. And it has S&P Global's full support in setting new ambitions in the data space beyond enterprise value to set a goal for mandatory impact integration in the financial system. And I think anybody looking around at the news headlines today will understand why. Why is data important? Data enables you to, yes, do artificial intelligence, but data drives decisions. So, I've never been to Turin before. I found my way here on imperfect data, and I had Google Maps, and I still got lost. But at the end of my journey, there was a nice young lady who showed me where to go. So data is not perfect. I still needed someone to tell me where exactly was the room.
Yeah.
And I asked a few other people. I didn't get there. So while data can be helpful in this space, and we need to improve data, we need comparable, reliable, assured data on sustainability to integrate to mainstream ESG into the financial services. And there's great work being done at the ISSB on enterprise value. We have to go further. There's great work being done in the EU on the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. We really need to have a global understanding about how we measure these things to actually decide what we want to do to mitigate them or to invest for impact. So that is something that S&P Global is working on. We have acquired a number of companies. You talked about concentration of data. We are probably an example where this is being done in order to mainstream into the financial markets. Our data doesn't show a very particularly pleasant world to live in by 2050, unfortunately. We're on, by our estimates, a 3-degree world, very far off our 1.5-degree target under Paris. And we have a huge amount of data. We have 600 billion data points just on ESG alone. Every day, our company produces 135 billion data points. That's a lot of data. We need to find out which data really matters for impact, how we can mobilize capital to actually target the SDGs, to target investments that are really going to change our world for the better. And that is going to take partnership. I think you said it best at the beginning. And I think the innovative, data-driven, collaborative approaches will find partners in the private sphere. We cannot do this as a data company alone. We really need to work with people like the GSG, universities, and in order to mainstream it into the system of global financial capital, we need it to be, at every point in the conversation, fit for purpose.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much. So, Karim, I think it's now clear how important it is to have consistent and trusted data. And so I think that scholar and a practitioner, as you are, may comment on that. And also, I think that we need to to give some attention to the origination process of the data and the validation process and the control and governance structure that would provide us with reliable and trusted data. Up to you.
Thank you, Mario. And so it's nice to be here. And just to see how far, David, to your point around how far the data discussion has come, we're not talking about necessarily definitions, though there's still a lot of confusion. But to address your question, Mario, I think one of the tensions we're seeing is in this drive to essentially produce more data, get more demand for data, try and bring it in forms that are comparable, machine readable, all those things. The big risk is we have the possibility or the probability of losing the context within which that data was created, analyzed, and then shared for decision making. And I think anyone who's ever collected any data, you know that your initial intent, by the time you end up with that piece of data and try and think about what form it's needed to essentially influence the decision maker, it's gone on a journey. It has its own story of how it got converted, interpreted, and lots of different organizations or worldviews were imposed on it. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges as impact investors and the people in this room that are building the field. If we think about what better source data looks like, one of our big questions is whose voices are included. And so as a community, I think we have an opportunity to ensure that the breadth of the stakeholders that are most affected, those voices are included at source. But we can't really even stop there, because the analysis layer is where it's getting the most tricky. We're including machines, algorithms, we're including a lot of perspectives that really have no relationship to the social environmental issues that we're trying to address. Is that good or bad? I don't know. I can say that at the very least it can be reductionist and strip out a lot of the context within which decision makers would love to operate in. So I think that second layer of how us as a community can ensure the analysis and interpretation layer, regardless of who designed the algorithms or who's doing it, doesn't lose the context of the people that are most affected. And then when we think about decision-making and reporting, everybody generally doesn't like annual impact reporting time. It's always painful. But how do we flip that and think about how we report as a value-generating opportunity rather than a thing you just do? And I don't have maybe a good answer. I have a set of potential tactics. But I think that that's an opportunity, again, for us as a community. There are lots of organizations in this room that have been innovating on how to present impact data, how to present the right kind of data that is appropriate for decision makers and to influence different parts of society. On the other hand, we have a lot more work to do, and I don't think it's simply about ensuring integrity of data. There's a big conversation right now in our space around impact integrity. We're still defining this term. Integrity for what? Is it in terms of the data was robust? We believe that the translation layer was done well. We believe that it was collected in the appropriate form. So I think one big opportunity for us is to define what we mean by integrity. The GSG has done some work several years ago around defining some of that. Rosemary Addis, through the steering group there, through the GSG, but we're now in a really interesting era where impact is not only technical, or the processes are technical, but they're actually political. We're seeing this week, last week, you know, when ESG begins to be defined in terms of some of its political dimensions, we have to respond, I think, in a apolitical, or at least acknowledge the way in which impact really matters for societies. And that, I think, is a big challenge for us. And maybe this is the next kind of round of questions around what we do to get there.
Yes, indeed.
But I'll stop there. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you, Karim. Yeah, so Stephanie, it's time to wrap up on one side.
Yeah, I think everything was said already.
No, okay, so I'll give you a few more hints. But of course, if you want to comment on any of the very interesting remarks that were done, you're more than welcome. And then, of course, we have discussed this before. I think that I would say that today the quality of our impact measurement algorithm is far better than the quality of the data we have, and that data are crucial in moving forward from impact measurement to impact management somehow. So,
comment on that, and yeah, it's. I mean, I share everything that my colleagues said here. Just to give you a bit of context, we are a sustainable private equity investor focused in Europe, mid-market. So think about founder-led businesses that we invest in at the brink of professionalization. So those are the types of entrepreneurs I work with on a day in and out basis. And it's really interesting that, you know, at this level, we finally moved on from just talking about measurement for measurement's sake, but actually we're starting to focus a bit more on kind of why we're actually measuring. And the reason is that we are all trying to like set goals and ultimately try to signpost progress and track progress, whether it's, you know, with quantitative data or with, you know, contextual qualitative data. And I think that's extremely encouraging, because for the longest time in these types of settings, I think people were just like, we need to measure something, right? And what I see at the practical level, as I work more on value creation with our businesses, is that people are really trying to understand that there's a commercial opportunity, but ultimately that they serve the people, right? So whether it's a commercial business that is providing a service or a product, whether it's any other non-for-profit organization, the whole reason why they exist is because they are supposed to give something to the beneficiary, and that's usually, you know, an affordable product, it's quality, and ultimately trying to compete in a marketplace. The only way that you now can do it is tangibly demonstrate that you're doing this somehow better than anyone else in the market. So I think there's like, you know, there's obviously kind of a consumer-led initiatives that people are like, you know, we're happy to pay for you know, a sustainability premium, or we're actually asking you to get a quality product. So I think that's quite encouraging. At the same time, I think you have a lot of industry-led initiatives that showcase, you know, like the folks from Harvard, that it's perfectly quantifiable and doable to treat impact as a science, like you treat financial services and those projections as well. You have standards and you know, impact measurement and management principles developed by the industry for the industry, such as the Impact Management Project. But also, finally, also a regulation, realizing that in order to build a competitive marketplace, you might need to set a few boundaries just to take it off. And I think the benefits will be huge, right? So it's all about, ultimately, you know, we're all in an investment value chain, that's great, but actually the people that we should care about are the end beneficiaries. What are we providing them with, and how good is that product? That means for the entrepreneur, the better I can articulate that story, the higher my multiple will be. For the investment manager, I can actually meaningfully explain what I am about, and ultimately have the investor allocate capital where, you know, it's most effective and aligned. So I think that's kind of where the quality data aspect comes in. It's ultimately helping businesses, investment managers, and also investors improve.
Yes, very good. Thank you very much. And I think I'll leverage on your last point. So, although you were very, very good in keeping answers very short, I think I will try to squeeze two questions in one for the next round. And you can pick both of them or just choose one of them. One point, of course, is that we are in the middle of a very dynamic regulatory phase. The European Commission is very active. We have very important initiative at international level. And so I think one question is, what do you expect from this regulatory activity? What is your vision on what's going on, and what would really be needed for developing an impact investing market and industry, on the one side. The other side of the question is, Ciro made reference to the value of this data, of gathering data and organizing data, as a sort of asset, digital asset to be invested in social enterprises. And that, I think this is a very, very powerful point. Investing data instead of or along with money, I think it's a very good point. So I will hear from you on either of these 2 points or both of them.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Different questions. I'll start with the first one on the regulatory space. And of course, I'm based in the US, so have experience there, but know that the situation is vastly different in the EU, and particularly as we think about the issue of materiality, whether we're taking a double materiality lens or looking at enterprise value. And at the moment, the ISSB, which we are immensely excited about, not just because it represents a step forward in how we think about financial accounting, but also because it came from so much consolidation, which is incredibly important and is wrapping in so many important efforts. So the way we think about the issue of materiality at the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative is using the lens of dynamic materiality. So we all know that what's material today will evolve over time. And our view is that over time, all of the social and environmental impacts that we care about here will also be proven to have value for the enterprise as well. And what we hope through what we're doing through impact monetization is that we can put, again, a digestible and quantifiable number around those risks and opportunities so that they can be we can understand better the relationship between different types of value, and they will eventually, we hope, be incorporated in what's being recommended by the ISSB. And of course, that's a different view than where we're sitting in the EU, but the one I'm best positioned to speak to. On the second question on the investment of data, I think that's incredibly interesting. I'd love to learn more about the initiative. We have tried to base all of our methodologies and calculations on openly, publicly available data because we want to avoid being a black box data provider. We want people to understand, when I talked about the relationship between what the number the investor is seeing and the number the company might understand, we want to be able to understand, to communicate. We took X, we multiplied it by Y, and we got this number. So we have tried to rely on publicly available data, but we frankly ran into a lot of roadblocks and had to purchase some of our own data. So I think that it's a valuable concept in terms of investing data as an asset. I also think that it's something we need to pay close attention to, as of course that is a continued kind of financial barrier to access to that data.
Excellent, thank you very much. David.
So I'm a bit of a regulation junkie, working in the government affairs team at S&P Global. So no surprises that I think there should be a regulatory baseline. 500 years ago in Italy, there was a man called Luca Pacioli who invented double bookkeeping. But it wasn't really until we regulated how companies had to disclose their financial reporting that we got a financial system that could actually really allocate capital according to data with integrity, according to the interests of the investors. And we had tremendous growth from that. I think there's a similar revolution that needs to happen in the impact space with sustainability data. And I think there's an important role, not just for regulation on disclosure by companies, but also on financial market participants. We're seeing this in Europe. I think we can't put too much emphasis on that. It won't actually solve the issue if you're just measuring it. I can stand on my weighing scales for the next 3 years. If I don't go for a run or reduce my calorie intake, I'll still see the same number.
Exactly.
And I do wonder whether we've made a fetish out of some of this reporting requirements without, and forgetting some of the necessary action and some of the policy action that we really need to see to have people take decisions based on the data. You need to incentivize, you need that nudge, you need the behavioral economics, and that has to come from policymakers as well. So regulation of sustainability data, yes, but also other things. Also other things to make our economy hit that target of net zero in 2050. At the moment, I don't think I'm seeing enough of the other things.
You're not.
No. And to the second point on data as an asset, absolutely. Data is an asset. Our company is based on the fact that data is an asset. We create data. We have humans all around the world creating data every day. But at the same time, it's an input to decision making. So we recognize the value of it and the public value of it too. A good example of what we're doing at S&P Global is trying to solve for some of the transparency issues in the private markets. We are partnering with a B Corp actually called Novata, where our input into the system is our ESG metrics, data, analytics, and it's going to enable, hopefully, the private markets to start building the kind of infrastructure and ecosystem they need to have at ESG, so that when a private company acquires a company, we don't lose that data. In fact, we shine a light on it. So that's one example I think that would be very interesting to discuss after.
Excellent, thank you very much. Karim, from measurement to action.
So I'm going to try and take a slightly different take on that question and not pick up the regulation one. We did some work recently just surveying ventures because, you know, myself and my colleagues were very experienced around doing IMM. We've been supported by some of the leaders in the space to do IMM who've been defining standards and tools, but it's just not easy yet to do it in practice. And so one question that was bothering us is, how do we make this more fun even, not just easy? I think it's fun. It can be fun. So, okay, all four of us, I think, agree that it couldn't be fun. But we asked ventures, you know, the classic notion seems to be that as an organization grows, it will progressively do more measurement, and that measurement will get progressively more rigorous. And we asked a bunch of ventures that have gone through this experience of being quite deliberate about their impact management approaches, and we realized it's just much more dynamic than that. They occasionally measure more or less. They may choose sophisticated methods or simple methods. They may use proxies or standards. And so, you know, when we grappled with the implications of that, one frame or what we've proposed is that we actually need to reframe the way we think about measurement today. Today, measurement is seen as quite static, quite linear, and in some sense quite technical. But what if we reconceived of it and thought about it as being much more adaptable, flexible, and iterative? And I think all of us in some way are trying to essentially tackle that through a variety of different levels. But the point is that if data is contextual, if our worlds are changing, whether it's regulation or the organizations we work with, then essentially our IMM approaches have to accommodate that and have to be built with that in mind. But it does force, I think, then a bit of a different take around what impact management looks like. I think a lot of the time when we think about measurement, it's actually fairly easy to measure. But when you ask the questions of what should you measure, how much of it should you measure, how much is enough for a decision maker, those are not necessarily technical questions. They're influenced by cultural factors, organizational, even political. And so for me, this next phase of what IMM and also how ventures and investors maximize the value of data has to acknowledge the fact that the technical issues, I think, are quite solvable. Any of us who've been working, I know we both have for a long time around technical issues. Some of those are solvable. There's still big questions, I think, for both of you around who pays and what they pay for, and I'm glad you're solving those, or at least helping to give us better answers. But I think for all of us, because we have such representation from around the world, what does a form of measurement or data that acknowledges diversity, that acknowledges stakeholder representation look like or need to look like, and then what is the value of that? And I think that's a very different question than we've traditionally asked ourselves. And by the way, I think it's very compatible with all the work around standards and approaches and impact-weighted accounts, et cetera. For me, impact management is everything that happens before you pick a standard and then after you figure out which standard is appropriate for you. And so for me, these are really big questions that I think are the next frontier also of what ventures can teach us. Maybe I'll stop there.
Karim, yes, I saw you smiling on those last words.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think on the data initiative, one interesting question we need to ask ourselves is also whenever we make these agreements with corporates is also how do you protect the data of people giving that away, assuming that it's not going to be used. So I think, it depends, think about, Elon Musk buying a share in Twitter, and everyone's like, now he's going to run for president, and, the world will turn evil. I mean, I'm hypothesizing here, but sharing data is great, but it really needs care, because it's ultimately people giving very private information away. So I think that's one aspect. Keeping it brief, Mario, on regulation, also that obviously is not going to be the golden bullet, right? I mean, I think it's a start. Similar to what we saw in the UK, where suddenly businesses above a certain size were required, for example, to report on their gender pay gap. It's not that the government went around and pointed their fingers at the corporates that have done and performed the worst. In fact, who knows what they've actually analyzed. But ultimately what that generated, I think, is a lot of reflection for employees working in a certain place, looking at how do my competitors do, should I go somewhere else? And I think similarly, we'll see this with the TCFD, with the SFDR, helping us develop benchmarks, and people and businesses and investment managers being brave to share that data in order to get better benchmarks. What is a positive outcome? Who decides whether it's good enough for a certain beneficiary? Is it really driving significant change? I think ultimately, it comes back to the quality of data point, but I think it'll encourage a really interesting discussion. We need these benchmarks because we're just at the beginning.
Very good. Thank you very much. I thank you all for your wonderful contribution. Thank you. And yeah. And well, I think if one day we will manage to have the first impact stock exchange in Turin, we will need a lot of data. So I'm delighted to invite my friend Rosemary, who will moderate our next panel, and thank you. And my friend Davide Dalmaso, I think, with him. So, Rosemary, thank you very much. No, forse Francesco.
Thank you, Mario. No problem. Thank you, Mario. Thank you, all your guests, for the many insights provided. And now we are approaching the second panel, which will be led by Rosemary Hedis, GSG ambassador. She's from Australia. Welcome to Turin. We will discuss financing social innovation. And to you the stage, Rosemary, and the presentation of your guests. Please.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here with you. It's always so inspiring to be in a literal space for innovation. And in a space like Torino, where I'm pleased to acknowledge our distinguished guests and all of you who have welcomed us here and who have joined us here with the rich history of innovation that we've heard a little about this afternoon. We heard of foundations formed in 1561. My country at that stage didn't even have convicts. But we did have one of the oldest continuous cultures in the world that can inform many of the ways we think about the world today. And we have before us a set of real challenges as we face into the things that we see in the world. Climate change, displacement of people, conflict, many, many issues that are causing inequities in our world. The Sustainable Development Goals give us our moonshots. And as we orient around that, we can remind ourselves that for all of the issues people are ingenious. We have a wealth of creativity, and with commitment, we can translate that into actions to take us forward. We worked out how to drill the petrochemicals out of the ground and out of the seas, and how to turn them into plastics and fuels that we now throw away and use, and have created part of these problems. So we can also work out how we can fix these problems. We have the capacity to drive the solutions, and innovation is the translation of the ideas and solutions into things that we can operationalize as goods, as services, as ways that we can move forward. Social innovation, I like to think of as the way that we orient that effort around solutions that are more just, more equitable, more sustainable for people and for the planet. And we have wonderful centres like this where people are bringing the best of their ideas and endeavour together with other resources like data. If we want these solutions to scale, and we need them to scale fast, then we also need to work out how we bring the other resources to that. Part of my own journey working on social innovations for nearly 2 decades now was a pivot point where you realise that if we can't bring the funding and financing to these things more effectively, we can't scale them. We also need some areas where we design for scale from the beginning, as well as relying on the ingenuity of entrepreneurs and others to create wonderful solutions and purpose-driven organisations. And we need a system for transactions as well as the individual transactions themselves. A system that can facilitate bringing more people in, enabling more and better solutions, and creating a virtuous cycle that helps take us more in the right direction. As we've just heard from the previous panel, we have imperfect information to work. We won't be precise all the time, but we do need to be directionally correct. And so the innovation that we're going to hear about from Davide Del Masso today, one of the founders of Avanti, is the thinking around a social stock exchange as an innovation in itself, and one of these pieces of infrastructure that can help us look to how we can create the system for transactions and to connect the financing to the promising innovations. I'm going to invite Davide to the stage to present to you the concept and the work on the social stock exchange here in Torino. And then, as he has some slides, we'll bring the rest of the panel up shortly after that. So, Davide, I welcome you to the stage.
Thank you, Merose. I think that your introduction was a perfect launch to my speech, because in fact, I think that the real starting point of our project is the consideration that our society is facing very complex challenges, and we cannot leave the solution of these challenges just to the free market economy players on the one side and to the public policy actors on the other side. And it's not because I'm ideologically have something against capitalism. I think that capitalism is very effective in creating new wealth, but it's not enough. I mean, we need a third category of actors if we want to tackle with this challenge. And that's where social economy comes in, however we want to define it. And the point is exactly that one. Can we put the slides on, please? We are now facing a paradox, because we have on the one side projects who are capable to deliver social impact, but need support, economic and financial support. And we have on the other hand investors, both institutionals and individuals, who potentially are eager to support these projects, but they don't know how. There is a mismatch. And when there is a mismatch in the market, that's exactly where a financial intermediary can play a role and can help the match between these two sides of the market and eventually facilitate and allow the closing of a transaction at a fair price. The idea behind it is that what we call the social economy, if it wants to play a credible role in the process of transaction of our society, needs to evolve. It to evolve in terms of quality, in terms of strategy, in terms of processes, in terms of managerial capacity, and also in terms of sizes. But all these things need resources, which means capital. That's where a stock exchange comes in. So the idea is that we can use an infrastructure which is typical of the free market economy and use it for a social purpose. So we started talking with the Borsa Italiana, which is a part of this conversation, although the project is led by Torino Social Impact independently from Borsa Italiana. But the idea is that we can take one of the markets that Borsa Italiana already manage and to design and implement a variant of this market exactly for social businesses. So these are our goals. We want, on the one side, the first more practical objectives is, how I was saying earlier, to create a new market who is not there yet, starting from an existing market, and more specifically the market for the small and medium-sized companies, which is called the Euronext Growth Milan, and to create a variant which makes it more, usable for social businesses. And the idea is to list in this market companies who intentionally and in a measurable way generate social impact. The second objective is somehow to facilitate the access to the market for social investors who are now reluctant to invest in social business for a number of reasons, and the most important of which is probably liquidity, so the possibility to exit from the investment once you are in, which is a typical problem of closed-end funds, which are today the main supplier of capital for social businesses. But the third and maybe most important objective that we set is to use the social stock exchange as a way to redesign the logic of the market. So we wanted to use the infrastructure of the free market economy, but to reorientate it for social purposes. So it's in a way an experiment that we want to test to redesign the way in which free market works. It sounds very ambitious, I know, but we are confident that we can make it. So what kind of company are we addressing? As I said earlier, we are looking for companies who have the minimum characteristics to apply for a, say, normal financial market. So they have to be profitable, they have to be ruled in a proper way, so they must meet the basic rules, listing rules of financial markets. And on top of that, they also promise to the market, to the investors, to deliver a social impact in an intentional way, in a measurable way, and in an additional way. So what we are asking to this company is to make a formal statement. And when I say formal, it means that it has to be incorporated in the statute or in the articles, in the bylaws. So it must be a formal commitment to deliver social impact. And we ask company also to disclose to the market in which way this impact will be generated, so how it is, say, governed, who is responsible for that, how will be generated, how will be measured, and how will be accounted to the market. And there will be an independent evaluator who will guarantee all the actors, and in particular the investors, of course, of the credibility and the reliability of the statements made by the issuers. So where do we stand? We have run a feasibility study, so it was a purely theoretical exercise on paper. Then we have incorporated a legal entity, for the Italians is a comitato, a committee, which is chaired by Guido Bolato, who you had the opportunity to hear today, the Secretary of the Chamber of Commerce of Milan, and who brings together a number of individuals and organizations who share the mission of the Social Stock Exchange. Then we have used the outputs of the theoretical study to run a practical exercise. So we have selected 8 enterprises, 8 social enterprises, who candidate themselves to run this, this experimentation. So together with them, we are simulating an IPO, and we will use this exercise to understand whether the things that we have set on paper actually works, where are the barriers, how we can overcome them, how we can redefine our assumption in order to make the process feasible, doable, and smooth. And we want to present the outcomes of this exercise somewhere in fall this year. And then, of course, the result of this exercise will be offered at Borsa Italiana, who is looking at this experimentation and what is not part of it for their evaluation and eventually for their consideration to go further and to actually create the market as we hope. This is the list of the companies that we have engaged in this experimentation. As I cannot describe them, of course, for the sake of time, but you might see that some of them are cooperatives, some of them are already have the qualification of social enterprises, some of them are family business. So there is a real variety in terms of market, in terms of size, in terms of legal nature, and so on and so forth. And we have in fact looked for this diversity because we think that we can learn more from different cases. Let me also mention something that I'm very proud of, because this exercise benefit of the contribution of a number of professionals, so expert of impact measurement, legal advisor, auditors, financial institution, who have put their people, their professionals at disposal for free, so it's a pro bono consulting, so we can offer these social businesses a free consulting service, and I'm very grateful, of course, to all of them, because without their help, all this project wouldn't be possible. And I also want to mention Camera di Commercio di Torino e Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo, who have supported with a financial contribution the project. Before closing my presentation, I wanted to mention 2 or 3 open issues that we have somehow to address, and fully honestly, we haven't sorted out yet. The first is, say, an evergreen dilemma, which is standardization versus customization. I think that one of the questions that may come from this audience is, how do we measure social impact? Of course, we have discussed a lot about that. For the time being, our approach is, let's use a principle-based approach. So let's allow the companies to tell the market, to to make their promise to the market, which impact they want to create, how they want to create this impact, and how they want to measure it. So it's not up to us to say if it's high or height enough to be in the market or not. We let the market decide whether the impact is more or less credible. But of course, this response is somehow a shortcut, because we relaunch the ball in the fields of the issuers. But not necessarily is the best way to tackle with that. So if someone in the panel or in the audience has better idea or has a contribution, feel free to share, because we need a dialogue with the experts and with other viewpoints. The second point that, and I'm concluding, Rosemary, the second point that we still have to sort out is the role of public policies. In principle, we all accept the idea that if a private company delivers a social positive impact, it has to be supported somehow. But we also are aware that there is the risk of adverse selection, and that if there is some sort of public measure that somehow incentivized the access to this specific market, that may be, a factor that somehow pollutes the value proposition and the genuine push of the company. So whether or not this market should be somehow subsidized, it's still an open question. And the third and most complicated question that honestly we haven't solved yet is the relation between social impact generation and profitability. So in theory, the idea is that if a social business can generate higher social return, that should be reflected in the price of the stock which is traded in the market. But how the price can in fact reflect and translate the value of social impact is a very complicated issue, and we still have to work on that. And even on that, I really much welcome the thoughts of our guests and, of course, of you all. So thank you very much for your attention, and I remain at your disposal for any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Davide, for that compelling presentation of the Social Stock Exchange for Torino, which combines some of the key elements of scaling the impact and investment, the infrastructure to keep building out the ecosystem and making it easier for people to participate and for the capital and the enterprises to be connected. We're going to tease out some of these ideas and questions now with our panel, and I'll invite the panelists to join me here on the stage. I'd like to introduce to you colleagues Rajiv Lal from the Singapore Management University, Fiona Melrose from the UniCredit Group, Laurie Spengler from Courageous Capital Advisors, and Fabio Pomoli from the Investment Committee of InvestEU. We have here on the stage a wealth of experience, people who've been involved in serial initiatives and some of the reports and thinking and development of the ecosystem that you've heard about here today. And so this is the beginning of a conversation where they can share some of their insights with you. And I'd like to begin by picking up on the themes that and the challenges that Davide raised to come to you, Rajiv, because India's also been experimenting and trialling some of these types of responses. What's the experience there, and what have you learned, including any things that might help to answer David's questions?
Well, I have to say I'm really heartened by hearing the Italian experience. I'd always known that there are a lot of similarities between Italians and Indians, but this really validates my hypothesis. So we are, I think, on a journey that could appear to many, including myself, to be quite risky. But there's a group of like-minded people who came together in a committee that was convened by the regulator, the securities regulator, to make a proposal on a social enterprise stock exchange. And that committee has submitted its recommendations. They are very detailed, very comprehensive, and it appears that they have, in principle, struck a chord with the regulator. So the idea of the social stock exchange, I think, has been very much internalized and accepted in principle. It remains to be seen whether it will be launched. But so the impulse and the thinking, the conceptualization is very, very similar to what you just described, Davide. But in one very important respect, it's audaciously, if I might use the term, ahead. The ambition is much greater. So not only is the social enterprise exchange that is being proposed in India for-profit enterprises, it is also supposed to be an exchange that allows not-for-profit entities to raise money. So, well, there you go. So the idea actually is to democratize philanthropy, is to open up philanthropy to retail contributors. And so a lot of the energy of this committee was actually devoted to articulating the criteria for selecting not-for-profit organizations to be part of this exchange. And they brought, so there are some criteria that are typically Indian that draw from the SDGs, but are focused particularly on the S as opposed to the E. So the criteria defined in terms of revenue share, expenditure share, share of customers served, et cetera, cater to disadvantaged segments of society, and there are very clearly established definitions of that in the Indian regulatory architecture already. So that's one very important conceptualization. The second very important contribution, whether it comes to fruition or not, is that they have deliberately highlighted the importance of investing in the supporting ecosystem to make this successful. And they have highlighted the creation of a community of social auditors that will come together in a self-regulated organization, which will have links to the Association for Chartered Accountants, for example. So that's one piece. They have advocated the creation of a capacity building fund to help this whole journey along. And they have recommended the creation of an information repository, all of which it seems to be vitally important for this idea to actually gain traction. So I think the dilemma we'll face is, do we get scared of the risk that is involved? Because clearly there's room for, it's very imperfect, and there's room for a lot of mistakes that could undermine the credibility of the idea itself. But there is a strong school of thought which says that, look, this is chicken and egg, you have to try, and maybe this will act as a catalyst, to your point, Davide, for actually incrementally creating the regulatory ecosystem for shining the light on this particular asset class. So the jury is still out, but I think there's room to be cautiously optimistic.
Mm-hmm. And the helpful thing about the nature of the challenges we face into at the moment is that we can always ask risky relative to what. And so, but to your point, there are risks in taking on what have been established frameworks and looking for different ways of doing it. And I think the important thing in what you're saying also, Rajiv, is it's not one thing that can be all things to all people. It is also having the supportive capability, infrastructure, services around that to help ensure that it's supported and has the best chance of success. And I want to come now to you, Fiona, and to a different aspect of the kind of infrastructure for transactions that we do, for really good reasons, spend a lot of time talking about enterprises and equity when we're talking about financing social innovation. Banks and organisations that provide debt finance touch nearly all of us and nearly all organisations. And have a really important role to play in society. And at UniCredit, you've been doing work for a while now, and I know when we spoke in preparation, you were talking to us about the plans that you're making for the future. It'd be great to hear how you're approaching that, what you see as the priorities and the opportunities.
Rosemary. So for us, when we're looking at ESG, we're looking obviously across environmental, social, and governance. And for banks, we have a responsibility that goes far beyond simply lending. We have a responsibility to finance a better future for our clients and for all the communities in which we operate. For example, our purpose that we recently announced with our strategy update is empowering our communities to progress. And within this, social finance plays a very important role. In about 5 years ago, we set up the Social Impact Bank at UniCredit, starting in Italy, and 2 years later, rolling that out across our group, across the many countries in which we operate. And for us, when we look at social finance, we're looking at microcredit, we're looking at impact finance, and we are dispersing credit to areas of the communities which will have more difficulty in accessing credit. And we're obviously looking very closely at how we measure this. For example, by the end of 2021, we dispersed about 400 million in these within the Social Impact Bank, which is touching about 6,000 projects. So that shows you that obviously these are relatively small projects across a large number of different social areas and affecting different communities. And one of our new strategy update at the end of last year, sustainability and ESG is obviously the core of our business, and we're obviously highly committed here. And within social finance, we have new targets for the next 3 years, where we're looking to grow our volumes by 10 billion. And that's a step change for us. Previously, it would have been 1 billion over the last 3 years, so it's a significant focus. And one of the key things that we're looking at is how do we measure the impact of these projects from a social point of view. We use the theory of change. We're looking obviously at the outcomes, and this is an area that is obviously relatively new in terms of measurement and KPIs, and each project will have different KPIs, whether it be a project to do with residential care or education. But to us, that's very important to look at the social outcome of the projects in which we are supporting and helping to finance. So it certainly is core to our strategy, and we're very keen to look across E&S together and within a framework.
And can I ask you also that for many banks to be doing so many small transactions would be unusual, and that some lenders like to look at things in more manageable sizes where they can be more streamlined about the kind of credit assessments. And these communities, obviously, they're not unidimensional in terms of the issues that they face. They would have a number of social and environmental things going on at any time. So how do you think about impact in that context and the relationship between different types of impact?
I mean, I think that's one of the challenges, is one of scale in social finance, because the KPIs vary widely, but it's having a consistent way in looking at the outcomes, asking the right questions on the impact that we made. But also I think increasingly we're looking at the interaction between E and S, and for us this is a very important area. Obviously climate change and the transition, the just and fair transition, which is something that we're truly committed to accompanying our clients in that journey, obviously has social impacts in terms of funding the energy transition and moving from fossil fuels to renewables, and what that means for certain industries. And so we're increasingly trying to look at the two in a combined way. But yes, I think measurement is obviously the key challenge here as well.
And it is challenging, but it's also obviously the nature of the world, and even the way the SDGs are structured is that kind of recognising it's holistic, interconnected, and that these issues have an effect on one another. Laurie, I know there's many of these things that you could chime in on, including the work that you've recently done with the Impact Task Force on Just Transition, and also the work that you have been doing in the banking sector with the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, and more recently in helping build out some of this infrastructure with groups like Brac. How do you think about how we can be financing social innovation and putting some of the infrastructure in place to make it easier to reach scale?
Thanks, Rosemary, and it's a pleasure to be here. In your opening remarks, you reminded us about the enormity of the challenges, and I was reading recently that the UN has now updated their SDG funding gap from the 3 trillion a year to 5 to 7 trillion a year, largely because of the COVID impact and the lack of progress we've been making globally. On all 17, there's relative progress differentiations between climate and social objectives, but it's massive. And so how do we get to that scale? And I think we're sitting in an extraordinary venue to remind us of the power of repurposing and revitalizing existing infrastructure for impact. I mean, this is a physical manifestation of that principle, and we've heard from Davide to Rajiv to Fiona examples of that. I'm going to share another example of how to repurpose and revitalize existing capital financial infrastructure for impact, and that's a transaction we closed a week ago for Brac. For those of you who are not familiar with Brac, it's one of the largest development organizations in the world. It was started in Bangladesh 50 years ago, 50, which is quite astonishing. But outside of Bangladesh, they've expanded into a number of countries with a combination of their education, healthcare, and microfinance approaches. They operate 6 microfinance entities now outside of Bangladesh, from Myanmar to Uganda, Tanzania, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Rwanda. These 6 entities have struggled like every social enterprise struggles for the capital they need, the debt financing they need to make loans, primarily to women. 95% of the borrowers and savers are women in these countries. They serve in aggregate now close to 800,000 women outside of Bangladesh. But accessing financing has been a consistent challenge, expensive and inefficient. And so we thought to ourselves, what could we do to get out of that constant fatigue of loan after loan, bilateral relationship by bilateral relationship? And so we decided to try to find a way to tap the capital markets. So it's another variation on what Davide is saying. It's a private markets transaction, but we took all 6 of those microfinance entities and combined their balance sheets into a holding company. And that holding company is domiciled in the Netherlands. And that holding company now has issued loan notes to investors at a scale that investors, and namely institutional investors, can begin to look at. Institutional investors, because of size and scale and reach and access, would have a difficult time finding their way into a direct loan to Brac's operations in one of the countries I mentioned. And yet they can purchase a loan note at the holding company level, which then Brac uses efficiently to downstream that capital and get it to the people and places and communities that's necessary. And 3 dimensions that I would just share that relate to also the threads of conversations. One is the familiarity of the vehicle. So investors, it's familiar to them, and they understand it, and so you can gain traction with that type of approach. But importantly for our innovation, we price the deal for impact. We pushed the envelope on the interest rate, a low interest rate to be specific, because of the demonstration of the impact that Brac can deliver. And we are showing that impact on a dynamic basis, to lift from the earlier panel, not on a static basis, but year on year we can show who we're reaching, and most importantly, what's the difference in that person's life? What is happening? And picking up from my colleague, several of my colleagues earlier on the panel, I think what's exciting is to put the voice of the individual into that impact validation. So we also use the 60 decibel lean data surveys. So it's not just quantification at the Brac level, but we're really listening to individual borrowers and savers and asking that question, what difference has this loan made in your life? And it's amazing what answers you get when you ask the question and listen to what they're saying.
Thanks, sorry.
Can I add one final thing? So what I've learned about this deal is that the fundamental asymmetry we have to solve for is, if we're really trying to mobilize at scale, is that investors do need efficient on-ramps to put their money to work. We're not going to change that, but what we have to do is structure through to enable the money to flow to the people and places who both need it, deserve it, want it. And I think with the creativity and lots of the examples that we're hearing around the table today and in our community, I think we can actually solve that asymmetry.
And the other thing you're highlighting, Laurie, is that we often get caught up in these discussions around supply and demand, and there's a hugely important aspect that's about the efficient appropriate intermediation, the building blocks that sit between where the need is and where the capital is, that can help us to mobilise and help everybody in the system to be able to access on appropriate terms. Which is a nice segue, Fabio, into your experience in terms of the intersection between economics and innovation. And I do want to come to your role with the InvestEU, which is a really important initiative. But I wonder, before we get to that, do you have some reflections to offer in terms of social innovation and how you think about these building blocks and the things that can make it easier to be moving capital?
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Mario, and the organizers. It's a real pleasure, and I learn a lot from what I heard. So, a few considerations. First, we are at the center of the social market economy and the interplay between states and markets and society across multiple projects, types of projects, multiple windows, and I'll come back to that. There are several ways in which we can encompass, we can consider the social impact dimension. One is obviously dealing with the specific social infrastructures. Another one is dealing with people and targeting people who are in vulnerable positions, and so having dedicated streams of activities for that. And the third one is social enterprises, right? So those are areas in which the codification and standardization processes that we are talking about here is quite crucial, because of the fact that we do not want to have what in another field has been for several years like a greenwashing. We do not want to have a social washing of projects and initiatives. We need to have rigorous indicators, and I really appreciate the initiative that has been launched in Turin, because I think it goes into that direction, and it provides a fundamental contribution to come to standardize financial products, not only on the debt side, which is quite important, but also on the equity side. So I really look forward to seeing developments on that. Coming back to the other point is how the European Commission and the European Investment Bank, and I started to chair the committee starting from November, and how do we approach that? We try to approach it asking for, I would say, rigorous additionality impact analysis so that we can build counterfactuals. Will this project be possible if not through the introduction of a guarantee by the European Commission that then can reduce the capital absorption for those who are involved because of the specific externalities and market failures that we want to address? And this comes with a specific set of metrics that we are somehow continuing to develop together with the implementing partners, meaning the national promotional banks, the European Investment Bank Group, and other financial intermediaries and operators. And so there is a continuous dialogue that we hope will contribute to diffuse these standards and indicators through different implementing partners, so that then, and I'll come to the second part, because I focused on social infrastructures, social enterprises, and social projects for vulnerable individuals or groups of individuals. But as with Mario and Giovanna Melandri, who's also sitting here, we did, in the context of a project which was commissioned by Minister Giovannini in Italy, we were insisting about the fact that social impact indicators should be, I would say, a pervasive feature of economic and social impact analysis across multiple windows of intervention. So not only within the social impact window, for example, in the InvestEU framework, the InvestEU framework aims to mobilize about 600 billion euros of investment in the next 5 years. The point is that the window, there is a specific window for social impact projects, but the challenge is to make social impact measurement and indicators pervasive across the different windows so that all of them incorporate that kind of externality, that kind of market failure as a fundamental indicator, a bundle of indicators that then we can use. I'll conclude here with one caveat. What I do see is a challenge that we have, because especially in countries like Italy, because of the fact that we were in a rush because of COVID, and so the way in which the recovery plan was designed, unfortunately, has, this is my personal opinion, an excessive reliance on public grants. And so it was a missed opportunity in terms of promoting blending schemes. And it's kind of this, the main challenge that we will, and we are still addressing in InvestEU, because political salience goes with the recovery fund, goes with the enormous amount of liquidity which has been injected into the system through grants. There is a congestion effect within the public system. And in order for us to come to social impact projects which have a high value for society, we need to mobilize the co-investment by private actors through blending schemes. So that's basically a kind of a, I'm not saying a request, but it's just a point that I wanted to share here, because we need to realign social impact and social goals with a new alliance between private, public, and societal components. And this is something that we really take commitment, persistency, and so it is crucial that a city like Turin is mobilizing all its financial and social community around that.
And if I may paraphrase aspects of what you're saying, that there is a really clear role for governments in this, including to put capital on the table. The design really matters.
The design, absolutely.
And the social and environmental factors are core to helping determine where the state should act and where it should be crowding in private.
It is more at the level of designing the interplay between the different actors and designing the way in which the different actors match and co-invest, rather than having a crowding out effect, as unfortunately we are observing nowadays.
Yeah. There are so very many issues we could dig into with a panel of this experience. Time doesn't allow us to do that now, but I am going to ask the panelists to, speaking, with an audience like we have assembled today, is a great opportunity to give people a call to action of, and if we could say, given the nature of the social issues and the social innovation that we require, if you could leave people with one thing to take away from today, what would that be? I can start with you if you like, Fabio.
It's happening. We saw it. It will take time, but it's happening. And so it will be a further step into the evolution of our societies, thanks to the work that you all are doing here.
Yeah, thank you. And Fiona, coming to you.
And I think one of the things is obvious from initiatives such as the social stock exchange is that everybody needs to work together in partnership. Areas such as measurement of the social impact aren't one actor cannot solve that themselves. It needs to be that everybody comes together to find the best possible way to do this and to leverage and to scale. So it's something that has to be done, I think, in partnership.
Great. Rajiv.
So I'll add my 2 cents from an emerging markets, particularly Asian emerging markets perspective, which is to say the call for action really comes from developments in technology. And one of the defining features of our time is how technology, data, access to data, all of that is making it possible to conceptualize, deliver, execute business models that actually make products and services accessible at much more affordable rates to previously underserved segments of the market. It so happens that in Asia, the underserved segments of the market is so large that these business models are actually, in a commercial sense, very, very compelling. So let's use that to make this happen.
And Laurie, giving you the last word.
Oh, goodness, thank you. I mean, as we think about the principle of repurposing existing infrastructure, including financial infrastructure for impact, the examples are extraordinary. We've heard just a few today, across all asset classes, across all geographies, across all segments. And I think for me, the one takeaway is as we do that and as we work together in collaboration, let's always ask ourselves at the end of the day, whose life is this capital really affecting and in what way? The who, especially with all of the urgency of climate, which we can't ignore, I know. But I do worry often that in the activity and the momentum, we're sometimes forgetting at the very end of a capital transaction, the individual, the life, and whose life is that capital affecting and in what way?
And if I can channel a friend who wasn't able to join us today, Fabienne Michaud, who leads SDG Impact for the United Nations Development Programme, she would tie together the previous panel and this one by saying that if the SDGs are our moonshot, as we get into that rocket ship to fly to the moon, we need the metrics that will help us to set a course and to course correct. But we can't plug them in at the beginning and just press autopilot. We need to be able to correct our course as we go along. We also need, as we've heard today, the people who can dream up a rocket, who can help build it, who can think about all the logistics that are needed for launch, and we're seeing people doing amazing work with that. And we need the people prepared to take that risk, as Rajiv started us off, to climb on board and with the belief that this is possible. We're all here today because we believe it is possible to reach the SDGs. It is possible for us to be a force for more positive outcomes in the world for people and the planet. Please join me in thanking our panel for their contributions.
Thanks to Rosemary Edis and her guests for helping us to better understand the horizon, the new era of impact and their key points. Also, they have prepared the foundation for the dialogue that will be led now between the chief editor of La Repubblica newspaper, Maurizio Molinari, and Sir Ronald Cohen, president of the GSG. A fireside chat to restore the ideal charge to all our efforts. I invite you on stage and please. The stage is yours. Prego, direttore.
Thank you so much. It's an honor, a pleasure to have here with us today Sir Ronald Cohen. Pact Economy, in terms of ideas and vision, owes you so much. So, first of all, thank you for being here and being with us and sharing your time and vision with all of us. Let's start actually from Turin. We have the impact investing community gathering in Turin, and historically, as we know, is a manufacturing city. How do you see this match? Can impact economy be helpful to Turin to design its own future, to find the new challenges ahead?
Maurizio, first of all, let me say what a great pleasure it is to see you not on Zoom, having had several conversations together previously. And secondly, since you talk about Turin, may I just congratulate the city of Turin and all the organizations, including our NAB, Social Impact Agenda per l'Italia, the foundations that have been involved, the Social Impact Torino, on putting together this fantastic gathering.
Thank you.
And so just to answer your question, Maurizio, there couldn't be a more appropriate place in which to say, on impact, the train has left the station. And being in Turin is very significant because Turin is becoming one of the leading hubs in Italy and therefore in Europe on this whole issue of impact. And it is a place which is famed for its industry, its business-like approach, its banking. And so having Turin as the location of this meeting is extremely significant in itself.
Now, more or less, we have 9 years passed since the Impact Investing Task Force, the G8, when Prime Minister Cameron started, and now the new G7 Impact Investing Task Force. What happened in these 9 years? What was the big advances that you saw, and what is still missing to be done?
It's a world of difference. The G8 task force put on the world's agenda risk, return, and impact. It said for the first time, we see an invisible heart of markets guiding their invisible hand, and that invisible heart is impact. The G7 task force came out with a very important set of statements. The first is impact accounting is the destination. We're shifting to impact economies, and impact accounting is already developing to support them, to support the valuation of companies, both on the basis of profit and of impact. And the work at Harvard Business School, which Katie Pinella talked about a bit earlier, shows already that in many sectors, Maurizio, the companies that pollute more are worth less than their competitors. So we have gone from noticing a trend to risk, return, impact, $13 trillion of ESG then, to saying now impact economy is a destination. We have more than $40 trillion of ESG, and impact investment itself, which measures the impact, unlike ESG, we've heard a lot about measuring impact today, is over $2 trillion, and it was non-existent virtually in 2013. So we've come a huge way. To now.
You know, about the discussion on metrics, this is a fascinating topic because in reality, impact economy is a way to measure protection, quality of life, protection of the citizens. But we need actually metrics, and there is a big discussion about ESG, how to do it, from where to start, what is missing. What is your take on this? First of all, do we need the metrics, and which one has to be?
The metrics are absolutely crucial, and that they are one of three very powerful forces acting to improve our world. The metrics enable us to make comparison between the impact of different companies and their profitability. From those figures, you can calculate how much a company is going to have to spend in order to fix its carbon emission, or its employment practices, or redefining its product offering so that instead of harming health because of too much sugar content, it improves health with more fiber content. So the transparency today is a way of shifting the goalpost. It's already happened. It's a way of measuring the performance of companies with two goalposts, profit and impact. The other two forces are the force of technology, which is embodied here also in this magnificent OGR center. And this force of technology today, through artificial intelligence, through machine learning, through augmented reality, by bringing the genome and computing power together, is enabling us to deliver impact in a way that humanity could never have conceived of previously. And it's a second tech revolution that is happening, with the impact thinking and technology coming together to disrupt every sector where there's negative impact and there could be positive impact. We've seen it with Tesla in the automobile industry. We're here in Torino, one of the cradles of the automobile industry. Who would have thought 20 years ago that Tesla, whose goal was certainly to make money, but to shift the automobile industry away from the combustion engine, would have achieved its goal? We haven't got only electric vehicles, but the world's automobile industry has shifted, and built a $1 trillion company at the same time. And those are the companies in the future, and they're coming of the future, and they're coming in healthcare. They're coming in education. They're coming in fintech. They're coming in other forms of transport. They're coming in the construction industry. $25 billion of venture capital last year went into climate-related ventures. So we are seeing a massive effort now to use innovation to achieve positive impact. And it's a new generation of entrepreneurs, and that brings me to the third force, which is the change in values. What really marks our epoch is a change in values away from making money without worrying about the consequences, to striving to make money and to improve lives and the planet at the same time. And that's what the millennial generation wants. It doesn't want to work for companies that are creating harm socially or environmentally. As you know, it became noticed by investors who worried about the profitability of their portfolios because of these changed preferences, and who too felt to the pressure of their customers to align their portfolios with their values. And so if you take the change in values, the leaps in technology, and the transparency, you can see why the GSG believes that we are reshaping capitalism. And we're reshaping it, Maurizio, out of necessity. Because underlying the change in values is a fear among young people initially that actually our existing economic system is destroying our planet and our society. Black Lives Matter, the huge gaps between rich and poor, which are at a peak that was only equaled before the 1929 Wall Street crash. The climate challenges that we face, the evidence of climate change that we see on an almost daily basis, have created a sense in the younger generation, which incidentally today, millennials and later generations comprise 60% of the workforce in the United States. They're no longer a minority, but have created a sense that we have to change the system. And governments haven't really played their role yet in doing that. It's being done mainly by the private sector. Philanthropists, too, have been behind the game in understanding this. But perhaps the Ukraine crisis now will accelerate all this.
We will arrive to Ukraine in a while. I agree with you about, of course, the need to reshape capitalism. I agree about impact economy as a possible very strong answer to inequalities. The question is if the criteria has to be same criteria for different countries or not. For instance, if we take ESG, let's take the G. If we decline G in Japan, in Italy or Nigeria, inclusion may be very different things. So do we have to look at this criteria as really world and common criteria, or to decline same criteria in different countries in different ways?
We need to contextualize them.
Context, yes.
We need to contextualize them. Putting it in a simplistic way, the value of a liter of water in a country which has plenty of water is very different from a country in sub-Saharan Africa. And so the impact measurement effort at Harvard is taking into account this contextualization. So we're heading to a world where the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, is standardizing quantities of CO2, of water, in inverted commas, of diversity, and so on, where the SEC is pushing companies to disclose on a mandatory basis all of their impacts, and the EU has pushed investors to disclose the impacts of their funds. And so that's why I say the train has left the station. So the missing piece of the puzzle now is the impact valuation to go with the ISSB's standardized quantity metrics. Now, the ISSB is part, I'm sorry for all these initials, but it's part of the foundation that is responsible for financial accounting across the whole world, except for the US. So between the ISSB and the SEC, you're covering the whole world. If you look at what happened in the 30s, after the Wall Street crash, companies realized they had had no transparency on profit. Every company picked its own accounting principles, and there were no auditors to verify the numbers. And when, after the crash, investors started to push for transparency and talked about generally accepted accounting principles that would apply to every company, people said, how can the same set of principles apply to every company, irrespective of size and sector? And by the way, if you can do that, it'll still be the end of American capitalism. We're in the same place with impact measurement today. People are investing in ESG without knowing 40 trillions worth, without knowing what impact they're creating. And companies and others are saying, you can never measure the impact. This is all a mirage which is going to fade away with dusk, you know? The reality is, as Harvard has shown, and others, the Value Balancing Alliance, which is based in Frankfurt, has also shown, if you go about it methodically, we really can measure the different impacts companies create. We can measure their CO2 emissions from their operations, their employment practices, levels of diversity, and we've already done that for several thousand companies and shown the economic cost of lack of diversity. We can measure their product impact on health and on the environment, and we will be publishing figures before the half year on their supply chain impact. So we've proved that it is feasible, but governments haven't yet understood that they need this. They need this because they have constrained budgets because of COVID, and now on top of it, bigger defense spending in many different countries. At a time when social issues are going to worsen because of higher inflation, increases in the cost of living will hit the most vulnerable yet again. And so governments have here the ability to bring the financial markets to help them to achieve their priorities. So governments should be pushing for this transparency, for making it mandatory. And indeed, regulators are having to do that, and we didn't have regulators in place in the 30s, now we have them. And regulators are stepping in and making it inevitable that this, what I'm saying and what the GSG is pushing for, will happen. Inevitable. Why? Because if this data, this impact data, is stock price sensitive, then every regulator has the obligation to ensure that every potential investor gets it at the same time on a comparable and verified basis. And that's why the ISSB has been set up, because of pressure from IOSCO and the world's regulators. So if governments realize it, they can be ahead of the game. They can begin to bring transparency so that companies and the investors in them help them achieve their goal. They can begin to implement pay-for-success approaches in their procurement, getting private investors to fund in the reskilling of a workforce. $8.5 billion were allocated at the G7 or at COP26 to South Africa for a just transition. A big challenge is the reskilling of 150,000 miners who would lose their jobs. The best way to deal with that is through pay for success, with the G7 promising to pay for every miner that is reskilled and gets into a job, and for investors to put that money up. Now, pay for success hasn't come to government and philanthropy since the social impact bond was invented in 2010. But look at how capital markets have adopted it. Last year, $1 trillion of sustainability-linked bonds and loans were issued. Not $1 billion, $1 trillion, where the rate of interest falls if certain environmental or social targets are achieved. NL raised 7 billion euros of sustainability-linked bonds in the last couple of years. So capital markets have understood it, but governments have not yet fully comprehended it.
You just referred to the importance of data. We heard on this stage a fascinating debate on the use of data analysts to improve social impact economy or to apply in the best way. What do you think about this? How data could be used at the best as a tool?
Data and powerful computing power and artificial intelligence and machine learning are what have enabled the effort at Harvard to publish several thousand companies' impacts. Take diversity, for example, Maurizio. The effort at Harvard has taken the view that the economic cost of not employing a person of a diverse background is really the wage they would have earned. It's the cost to their community. Now, through big data today, you can compare the diversity within a company's facilities and in the community outside.
Absolutely.
You can take an average wage for the company and you come to an economic value. In the case of Amazon, it's a $6.5 billion diversity debit. In the case of Apple, it's $2.5 billion, roughly, from memory. But if you relate it to the wage bill, the picture changes, and that's the value of analysis. It brings insights. Amazon's diversity debit as a percentage of wages is 16%, and Apple's is 24%. So now you begin to see how you use this data to bring insights to the impact performance of a company. And if investors judge that they prefer to invest in a company which has positive impact or which has improving impact, we can't disengage from every fossil fuel company in one go today. But what investors are doing is they're disengaging from those that are doubling up on fossil fuel investment and investing in those that are investing in clean energy at the same time. And so you begin to see your portfolios rotate in the same way they did with the advent of the tech revolution, whereas as a young man in my 20s, I was privileged to be present. In the early days, people thought that technology would only change the computer industry. Look how wrong they have been. The PC brought us the chip brought us the PC, the cellular phone. We developed the internet, and it disrupted every model. The combination of technology and impact thinking and transparency today is leading to a similar rotation in investment portfolios. And it started with the growth in ESG and in impact investing.
Let's come to Ukraine. Impact economy is a vision to face challenge and try to solve the new problems of the new century. And suddenly we are pushed back to the previous century by a terrific old-style war. Does impact economy has the tools, or the opportunity, to face the consequences, terrible consequences of this conflict?
So I think it becomes more relevant than ever, although there are bound to be some headwinds, which I'll talk about. Why is it more relevant than ever? What is the reaction of most countries in the face of this aggression when interdependence was supposed to bring stability, as you were saying? The first is we have to be more efficient in our use of resources as a first step in reducing our dependence on foreign suppliers. And secondly, we have to develop our own capacity to generate our own natural resources. What does that require? Investment. Investment in what? Is it going to be investment in fossil fuels? No, because climate hasn't gone away. And so you're beginning to see these huge flows of venture capital, and they will increase now as companies redouble their efforts. Now, where will the headwinds be? ESG has portfolios without fossil fuels in. Fossil fuel prices have gone through the roof. So whereas ESG looked great over the last couple of years, today ESG is going to look less profitable than investing in non-ESG, which includes fossil fuels. However, impact isn't just about energy, as we were saying. It's about health, it's about education, it's about fintech, it's about the construction industry, transport. It's every sector. So we may find that the detractors say oh, fossil fuels perform better than ever, so let's just continue investing in fossil fuels. But most people are going to realize it's the road to perdition, to the destruction of the planet. So there may be some headwinds, and there will be some headwinds, Marito. You and I have chatted about it before in one of our conversations. Not everyone wants this impact transparency to happen. Many companies are concerned about how their impact performance will look if it's revealed. They don't even know how their impact performance is. And so we find ourselves in a situation where we're likely to get pushback through the law courts. Maybe we may find different interest groups suing regulatory agencies or other efforts to bring this transparency. But we will also see the other side of this. I'm told there are 1,500 lawsuits in the United States against companies for climate damage, and that there are over 50 in Europe. And so we're going to go through something similar to what happened 50 years ago, when the Milton Friedman doctrine came in, and people began to sue companies for not maximizing profit. And now the lawsuits are going to come for not optimizing impact. So it's not a transition which is going to happen without some people pushing back. But it has to happen because there's no other solution to our climate problems for a start, and to many of our social problems. The trick is to realize that it's not governments that create pollution, it's companies. And our existing economic system leads companies to create pollution in the search for profit because they've been trained to ignore it.
Do you see autocracies having a similar approach to ESG?
I think market economies will eventually gravitate to impact measurement and impact investment. If you think of China, China happens to have the biggest fleet of electric buses in the world. I think it may be bigger than the world's electric bus fleet combined. I'm not sure. If China decides to bring impact transparency for reasons of pollution in its cities, it can do so much more easily than we can in our democracies by simply flicking a switch and saying every state-owned enterprise will implement impact transparency. So to the extent that governments have social or environmental priorities and understand that they can use private markets to bring about the change and pay later, or to encourage companies to deliver the change, I think you will find market economies that are not using democratic regimes politically will go in this direction.
During the G20 summit that we had in this country in autumn, the biggest surprise was India. And if I may say also biggest disappointment. Western leaders, including our Prime Minister, were expecting a more open, flexible approach. What is going on in India? Regarding, of course, ESG and impact economy, respect for the environment.
I'm not an expert on India. I haven't been there for 3 years. There are people from the GSG, from our organization in the audience who are from India. Perhaps Rajiv Lal would like to answer afterwards. But there's no doubt that the race to industrialization in emerging countries, using traditional fossil fuels, creates a huge amount of pollution for the whole of the world. And countries can take the view, you all benefited from it before me, it's my turn to benefit now. You sort out your own carbon emissions before you put pressure on me to do it. But I say that at a very superficial level of knowledge.
I have two last questions. The first one is a kind of follow-up from Ukraine. The aggressive country is Russia, and this is pushing us to face a terrible question. Did we, as the Western democracies, had the wrong approach to their think tank economists? Because there was a moment at the end of last century where they were actually opening up to us. And we did try to share with them our values, market economy, capitalism. What went wrong? What were the most serious mistakes that we did?
I think what's happened with Russia is that the leader of Russia is very concerned about reconstituting the Soviet Union to a degree, and secondly, is very concerned about not having military power located on Russia's frontiers. And in a way, the message of Kissinger in a 2014 article that Ukraine should remain neutral, like Finland, that the West should not make an effort to attract the Ukraine into NATO, is part of what has happened now. Now, that doesn't condone the terrible massacre that we have seen by a very powerful neighbor on a much smaller neighbor. But I don't think the West is completely free of mistakes with regard to managing the situation, the political or the military dimension with Russia.
And the last question is regarding our country. I mean, the beautiful and incredible and stunning aspect of impact economy is that it is a way, a desire, a vision to fix the world, to make the world better. The next panel after us, we'll have the Deputy Minister of Economy on the stage. And it's a privilege to have her here. Thank you so much. What is the advice that you may give to our government in how to approach and improve impact economy in this land?
Well, Giovanna will be quizzing the minister, so she will also come up with an answer. But it seems to me that those who didn't embrace technology missed out, and those who don't embrace impact will miss out. Italy has set a very ambitious recovery plan with very important social dimensions. The tools of impact investment are very valuable to you, and they're available at scale. So you may be the one who is able to bring them into action as is required.
Sir Ronald Cohen, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Wonderful to chat to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sora. We are at the end, and here we come to the last speakers for today. It's very important to put the last piece to better build the jigsaw of future commitments. Giovanna Melandri, Chair of Social Impact Agenda for Italy and GSG Ambassador, help us in this reasoning. And after, she will discuss with Laura Castelli, Deputy Minister Economy and Finance. You have 30 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me just introduce this conversation with Laura Castelli very, very briefly, and trying to sort of doing the closing up of this session. Again, thanking very much Sir Ronnie Cohen for being with us today. Let me just put forward to you 2 or 3 very brief thoughts. One is this great movement, which is growing worldwide. I still remember, Ronnie, when it was the G7 task force. In fact, it was the G8 task force, which lost Russia at the time. So it really started from 7 countries. And the fact that under your leadership and with many of the people that are in this room now, we decided to create GSG and the Global Steering Group, which is now in about 40 countries in the world, is such a great achievement. And if we think of it, I mean, this movement started as a reaction to the financial crisis of 2008 and 9. It was a reaction and a sort of understanding how the financial sector could reform itself. We've always talked about it was the idea of an exit strategy for a financial capitalism that wasn't working. And now we're here. We've went through these 2 great shocks. This is to introduce the conversation with the Italian minister. These 2 shocks, the pandemic shock and obviously the terrible conflict. And we are trying to design how this new impact era has to look like. I'm taking home 2 things from this conversation this afternoon, and we will discuss this even tomorrow. One is we need standards. I don't want to go through all what you just said, Ronnie, but I think that the ISSB exercise, the impact-weighted account initiative, all of this is really turning into, I mean, this wasn't even possible, even maybe, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and now we are there. You know, we're really down to the point where we are defining the way we need to measure, and measurement is crucial. But the second thing, and so this is a great philosophical exercise, it's a great political exercise, because it's an exercise, if we think about it, still too many of the assets under management in financial markets are still regulated by regulations that were after World War II. We still have regulations that complied with the world of 1945. So, I'm bringing that home. This is a great philosophical and political exercise, how this can converge with data and all that has been said. Second thing, and this is when I want to call on stage Laura Castelli, is role of governments. Role of governments, role of regulators. And I think this is crucial, and I just want to simply say to all the delegates of the GSG here that the Italian NAB, the Italian National Advisory Board, the Social Impact Agenda per l'Italia, which I have the great honor to chair since too long, by the way. We need some turnover, but I'm very honored to do this still, has grown so much in terms of stakeholders. Banks, insurances, Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, obviously the social cooperative movement, the demand side of the ecosystem, the universities, the think tanks. You know, it's huge. Now we are ready. We're mature. We're ready to design. But there's one bit which is missing. Not totally. I want to acknowledge that, and I will just acknowledge Laura Castelli for her great work. But strategically, we're still not there. We need government to understand that exactly because the EU yesterday, in fact, it's on today's agencies, the EU has asked Italy, and I'm quoting, to arginare la spesa pubblica.
Set a margin to public expenditure.
Mental, social, generational, gender issues, only with public finance. We're not going to do this. So the new impact era is crucial for Italy, because Italy has had a very generous moment now. We need to put this on the ground, but we need to have impact investment as a major pivot for changing and transforming and solving our problems. So this is why we need the Italian government. We will do this conversation in Italian, but you all have your translation, so please put it on, because I would like to have a dialogue with Laura Castelli, please, and welcome her. Eccoci.
Here we are. First of all, thank you so much, Deputy Minister. We are really, really grateful. We're really, really happy to have you here today. And I would like to go back to the few words I mentioned in the introduction, which I spoke in English. Right today, we got this recommendation from the EU. This recommendation says, be careful, the public budget is under pressure. You should continue with your reforms. You should implement your National Recovery and Resilience Plan efficiency and orient the investments towards those environmental, energy and social transition that can make it possible that this new necessary season of investments can be really successful. As Sir Ronald Cohen said before, we do not need just an investment, we need impact investment. I won't dwell on this now because we've been saying many things about this today, but these investments must optimize risk, impact and profit. So the first question for you is this. You've had a very important mandate at the ministry. It is the first time that the Ministry of the Economy, there is a person in charge of social economy. So the first question is this. What about this important role that you have in the government, and how can this role translate into support to this movement in Italy, let's speak frankly, to favor, support and build those public and private partnerships that are at the core of this new impact era that we are discussing today? Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and I really wanted to have the first answer as the most emotional answer. I fell in love with the social economy because it has no boundaries, and today's event is clear evidence. There is no limit in terms of rules, in terms of laws. It can operate even without laws in any country, because that is what is going on in every country in the world. We see things that go beyond legislation in these realities. And this makes it possible to have a culture, a philosophy that embrace the life of people, even when governments didn't understand it, even when governments are not aware of it. This is the most fascinating aspect. This is the first big obstacle that has to be overcome. But inside this, a lot of culture has to be created, a lot of questions have to be answered. Who decides what kinds of impacts should be in certain communities where there's no democracies that we know? And who decides whether citizens can decide about the impact that they can see in their policies? In every country in the world, the answer may not be the same. How am I dealing with this? Well, first of all, I'm trying to explain that what we're living now is far more relevant to social impact and social economy than we may expect in how we use our resources. And today, this recommendation we got is really important because in these recommendations, what is said basically is that impact can improve our accounts. And the Italian court is also saying this. If you think of future generations and you have to spend your resources effectively, well, this should be done in a way that considers the impact from future generations. That's the way. But Italy is lagging behind in this respect. There is a totally unknown knowledge, unknown concept about impact. The first impact that we are experiencing is the impact of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. We are really unaware. Giovannini was mentioned before, and the job that he tried to do in terms of the impact on infrastructure. And he had a hard time because Brussels didn't really say, OK, we greenlight your initiatives, go ahead. Well, this partnership can take advantage of this kind of help because partnership can support the public what is not able to do. As regards partnership, I will ask two questions in one. The National Recovery and Resilience Plan is a one-of-a-kind opportunity, I believe, for our country because eventually it's not that you are bringing all your receipts to EU offices. We have to demonstrate to the EU that all the objectives in each line of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan have been reached. So, two questions for Deputy Minister. Number one, why don't we try to experiment in implementing this plan some mechanisms of impact measurement, impact assessment? Our colleague mentioned the committee in which we participated with Minister Giovannini. This can be done in nearly all sectors. Well, even all sectors. We can combine these objectives, which are already result-driven objectives in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. I believe this plan will change the administrative and public administrative culture dramatically, far more than we can imagine now. And if this doesn't happen, it means that it will be a failure. I see some skeptical faces, but I am optimistic. I believe it can happen. This is an appointment with history that we cannot miss. But the objectives in the plan can be integrated with the mechanisms of the impact measurement strategies, the impact that will be generated. So the question is about a typical tool that the people in this room have been discussing for 8 or 9 years now. These are tools that are built around the results, social equality bonds, outcome funds. Basically, these tools are partnership tools where part of the public administration, be it the state or the municipality or other authorities, can give the management of these objectives to a private investment. I really speak from the bottom of my heart, Laura, and I believe there is a technical issue. It's not a political issue, it's a technical issue which must be solved. Please help us solving this problem. This problem has to do with the general accounting of the state. I'm also referring to my previous experience now. That is, the SIB, or the outcome fund, can work because at a certain stage the public administration can save some resources which has to be then returned with interest, but this accumulation, this provision can be difficult to achieve, and we discussed it with other authorities because this provision can be considered as public debt. I'm speaking in very technical terms now, and so I'm getting back to the main idea, because in France this was solved, in Germany it was solved, in the UK it was solved in different ways. So in Italy it has to be solved too. The social impact agenda for Italy represents a lot of forces, and we are ready to support the Italian government to design and to engineer, as Mario Calderini often says, agreements between public and private entities that are oriented to the measurement of impact. Will you help us? Well, as regards the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, I agree with you. We already had discussions on this. There is truly an understanding problem here. The impact measurement was given by Brussels, and Italy wrote a plan, drafted a plan, and they asked whether that plan could achieve some objectives. We didn't mention that really because we don't have indicators as of today. And so this is already indicative of the fact that this is necessary, but we're not ready with our own tools. Nobody has mentioned this over the last few months, that is, that we were not really able to say, well, we have this plan and this is the impact because I measured this with this tool. This is the first downside we have to be aware of. And then I hope I can tell this same audience next year that we were successful in this. I hope to be able to implement tools that are available from public accounting measurement tools in social economy. The infrastructure is there. When I talk about this at a ministerial level, reactions are quite positive. So in the first budgetary law, I hope this can be done. I hope because it is necessary. It is necessary for enterprises, for private operators, for all those assessing different allocations for investments. And this is something that will complement what we have, because that's where the public part realizes that the private part can support their job. It's not just about getting money out of our purses. This has been done in private-public partnerships in some administrations. We saw the possibility of some realities in using private entities to manage public projects. That's a philosophy, and that should be applied to a partnership where civil society is as accountable as the state. So there is a bit of a difference here, and sometimes I admit that I have to say that civil society representing the private resources of investors is more responsible than those managing public resources. This is quite evident when looking at attitudes and approaches. I believe it is not difficult to create this, to do this. I believe that as we talk about this, we understand that it can be done, and things can be implemented through laws. But it's not that laws are drafted and then they manifest themselves by themselves. So creating impact indicators that are public can be done. There are infrastructures at the universities that have already done this job, and other infrastructures that have already done this job. So culture has to be changed, and this is what really worries me. My question is, are we all aware of this? Have we understood that this is the way forward? I believe that this approach is more present in younger generations than elder generations. And why? Because today, a young person asks themselves, what is the political objective? What is the objective of my country when my country invests money? So this is an impact-related question. It's a natural question that they ask. And this is not done by the state. So there's another downside, which is the technique, but also the technique of those working in the infrastructures. We are seeing this in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, where in some local bodies there's no enough qualified staff that can manage what is enshrined in that plan. We talk about continuous education in the private sector. Well, this is all the more necessary in the public sector because it's really missing. But can we try and implement one SIB, one SIB? Yes. You said that you saw that the minister didn't say no. He said yes. Yes, but we have to talk to the general accountant, manager of the state, and the treasury. Yes, you mentioned France, the contract impact social. They managed to solve this problem, this obstacle. Yes, we did a social agreement with my French correspondent to cover the things that can work in our countries. They've just had general elections. We can start soon and do what we are able to do. This is something that I asked the French colleagues to do together. And in the next budget law, I hope to obtain this, and I know that the minister is sensitive to this, is to obtain a specific budget to social bonding in some sectors. But I insist, culture. Culture is still missing a lot. Thank you. One more question is this. We have our observatory in social impact agenda for Italy. And there's something that we also heard before, which is this. All the banks, we heard from Unicredit before, but also Banca Intesa, cooperative banks, basically the Italian banking systems over the last few years have been having this impact division. They all have them. Also, the role of Cassa Depositi and Prestiti is really important in the industrial plan. This institution, with this idea of impact measurement, has been really fundamental, and this has to be implemented. And the role also of social cooperation. So, Laura, this debate has always been prominent in our environment. There is the supply side, there is the demand side, and we keep looking at developing the tools for capital flows that may indeed nurture this impact enterprise dimension. The Italian delegation of GSG historically has always asked themselves and also has always problematized the issue of capacity building in the world of social enterprises. In Italy, there is a historical cooperation-oriented tradition, and there's also the whole world of the benefit corporations, but we have the world of enterprises beyond any definitions. That is, enterprises that want to optimize risk, profit, and impact. So let's consider this side of transferring competences, skill transfer, and the creation of demand, perhaps from Rome down, because in Turin we have this experience, and this is evidence of how vibrant, how competent, and how educated the world of social enterprises is. But there's a lot to do, and is there anything you would like to share with us in terms of perspectives and ideas?
I think this is probably a topic that we need to deep dive at the Ministry for Economic Development, because we saw that, for example, that there were some years where we allocated a lot of different funds in order to digitalize companies, so there were a lot of different allocations, different funds. But I think this is what we need for the time being right now. So we need to have resources that are devoted to partnerships. All those who are able, to create partnerships. It's not going to be just the state, so that particular business can become a social business. But it can work only if we change our own philosophy. I grew up in a non-ideological context, and that's why I give some things for granted. The ideological policy is the one that says, then this is something good, this is not so good. We still have a very strong Moloch today on this topic. And what is this Moloch today? I think that this Moloch is that just this kind of world, it's just something that is a pre-right for some kinds of businesses that are very limited in the civil rights, and it is just a part of the whole situation, and not just the company, but just also a corporate. What I always say is that I see a 30-year-old guy that wants to open up a business. He knows that it will have a very strong social impact, that really understands what kind of social impact it's going to have in this kind of situation, and he's going to wonder, am I going to open a business? Am I going to found a social business? Am I going to open a benefit business? Well, what is the reason for my business? Italy is facing this kind of problem because Italy was not able to innovate the legal social nature of companies. Why? Because actually, so we only thought that there were just some social categories that were useful to pay less taxes. I'm very bad in saying that, but I know that. I have to say that. So, for example, you say, I ground a corporate because I pay less taxes. But then there's a normal company, for example, that is carrying out another activity that has the same social impact, just like a cooperative, but then it's just a limited responsibility company. And I think that that's a very strong challenge we need, of course, to overcome in Italy. But, if you put the impact at the center of all debates, I think that all that can be swept away very quickly. I do agree with that, just like in a relation. What we really wanted to have is really the impact of the economic activity. That's the reason why this kind of approach is a kind of shortcut, a real shortcut. But from my viewpoint, as Minister for Economy, I see a lot of reluctance. And on one side, you have the real world that is founding businesses, and is also then satisfied with a limited responsibility company because it will. He or she will understand that there's a lot of space in order to improve economy, but also then money rentability or the GDP produced, if we want to talk about the GDP of a country. On the other side, we have also the lack of willingness to change the underlying legal framework. It's very hard to change it. Maybe it's not needed to change it, and I do agree on that. That's why I have a very similar approach, just like yours. So probably you can do that without considering this kind of background. It is going to be much more useful, and we really believe that we come to a social company with no matter what kind of legal nature will have the same rights, the same advantages. It's like the one what we see in a traditional way, a kind of a third sector company. Let's say there's a train going by. This tax reform train. This is something that we can probably do on tax matters. I'd like to thank you very, very much. I'd like to also to say that the so-called impact movement ecosystem has grown a lot over the last 10 years, even from the cultural point of view. This kind of dichotomies that you reminded us of. I remember then together with the Castelli, so we were actually then a kind of hotspot because we were, then receiving firebombs from the right side, firebombs from the left side. On the right side, because they were saying, you wanted to, how can I say that? You wanted to say, so you wanted to have a Main Street finance into the social dimension. But on the left side, we have also then criticisms because, of course, we had all this kind of impact consequences. Things have changed. I think that this is not there anymore, so I'm quite sure about that. Now we have the urgent need for a change, for a social, economic, and environmental transition. This is something that is a common good everywhere. So we do have technical tools. We need to have legal tools everywhere, need to be implemented. I think you can help us quite a lot. So probably your last considerations. Once again, I would like to thank you very much for being with us today. I just wanted to come to a conclusion because I want to say that Europe is going much faster, has a faster pace than Italy. So that in my considerations, I wanted to of course, be associated with the European trend because it's much faster than the Italian one. This is the only way to speed up, our train, speed up our process of that rational way we could do that. And that's why the way we go back to the train, to the stations. The impact company has left the station and Italy has left the station too. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Castelli.
We are at the end of this important event. I want with me on stage Cliff Pryor, CEO of GSG. Okay, hi Cliff, welcome. With felt passion and desire for the future, essentials for social investing and our daily commitment. Also, a great sign of hope to conclude our talk. We can continue our meeting. You speak. You want to speak? Okay, a little bit for the end, because now we can continue our meeting with some refreshment, which will be served in the building next door on your right. Thank you for your time and take care. Please, for all those who get the headphones for translation, please don't bring them with you. Leave them on the seats or the desk. In Italian, chi ha usato le cuffie per la traduzione.
For those who have used the headphones for translation, please not take them away. Just leave them on the chair.
I really just wanted to say a big thank you for giving us such a wonderful space and such a fabulous, warm welcome. A welcome with impact friends here in Italy for the GSG's leadership meeting 2022, a new impact era, over 100 leaders, another 50 online, 53 countries, all dedicated to impact. I want to thank the outstanding leaders that have made Torino such a leading center of impact. Michela Favaro, the Deputy Mayor, Massimo Lapucci from CRT and OGR, Giuseppe Del Erba, Cristina Di Bari from Cortino. The Italians are probably laughing at my terrible Italian of these names, but hey. Guido Bellato, the Chamber of Commerce, Mario Calderini, Torino Social Impact has been so helpful to us. Laura Castelli, the Vice Minister, Giovanna, who we just heard from, Maurizio Molinari, Paolo Mulasano, just all the speakers. Thank you. Thank you from Sir Ronald, from all of us at the GSG for all of your help, all of your interest, and everywhere here, thank you, and keep driving for impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cliff. Enjoy Turin. Goodbye and take care.